This is the Convene podcast. Today, we're exploring how a SNAP-eligible culinary training program in North Philadelphia is shaping careers, strengthening communities, and supporting the hospitality workforce that powers business events. Senior editor Jennifer Dienst talks with Chef Alexa Williams, a graduate of the Philabundance Community Kitchen and now a line cook at Fork, one of Philadelphia's most respected restaurants. Alexa shares her journey from risk management and events into the culinary world, how knife skills and life skills helped ground her during a difficult season, and why programs like PCK matter for restaurants, meeting planners, and the broader ecosystem that makes destinations thrive. We start now.
This is Jennifer Dienst, Senior Editor with Convene magazine, and I'm here with Chef Alexa Williams, who is going to share with us her journey in the culinary industry, as well as with the Philabundance Community Kitchen training program. So thank you so much for joining me today, Alexa. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Let's start. Just tell me about yourself. Did you grow up in Philly? Tell me a little bit about, where you grew up, your background, and how maybe you found out or considered moving into the culinary space for your career.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. So I'm originally from North Jersey, but I spent a lot of my life in the Poconos. My family's from the Caribbean, like I was telling you a little bit earlier. My mom's from Jamaica, my dad's from Antigua. And even if you're not familiar with the region, I think most people can associate that region with a really rich food culture. So that's always been a part of my life. Some of my earliest memories surrounding family is like cooking and like even if it isn't like a major holiday, it's like cooking just a regular dinner with my mom. And it's like, her hands were in meat. I was in charge of like putting seasonings in her hands so there was no cross contamination. So I was always involved in it. I love to cook. I love to eat. The two do go in tandem. However, I wasn't always oriented toward the culinary space professionally. I actually went to college for risk management and insurance, and I was an insurance underwriter for a little bit. I worked in events as like both an event production assistant. Once I realized like insurance just wasn't for me, I didn't feel like it was purpose driven for me and what I wanted to do with my life. I worked in events and it was a fun space, but I just realized that just wasn't for me. I moved to Philadelphia in 2024 around that summer, actually for my events work. And during that time, I actually lived very, very close to Philabundance where they are in North Philly. And it was really truly just because of like, oh, I just want to volunteer, like kind of going back to just like being purpose driven, something that also was really integral to my life, is just giving back to the community. So I only really saw Philabundance as like volunteer opportunity for me and for me to feel more integrated into the community. But when I learned about their other programs, specifically their community kitchen, I was like, wait, why not? I turned down a job offer for going back to the risk management insurance space. So I, had the time. Events wasn't fulfilling me in the way that I wanted to. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I take this time to invest? And it's actually been a little bit over a year since I started the program, and I'm now working in the field, and I couldn't be happier.
Amazing. So you went through the Philabundance Community Kitchen training program, which is it about like 8 weeks or
It's actually about like 16 weeks. Yeah.
16 weeks? Okay. So tell us what that was like. What did you love? Was there anything you didn't love? And kind of what skill sets or trainings did you just really enjoy while you were doing it?
I always tell people, like, I always preference, like, I didn't go to culinary school. Like, Phil Abundance isn't a full 4 years of culinary school. That'd be very hard to do within 16 weeks. So the program is split into two tiers. The first tier is the first 8 weeks where you're learning just, you're getting in the kitchen, you're making what, you would consider a restaurant family meal. So for all any staff, other students, and any visitors who come as volunteers or etc., your responsibility is to take classes in the morning, utilize what you learn in those classes in the kitchen. And then after that, we're taking some other classes, primarily around our ServSafe and also some life skills classes. I would say what makes Phil Abundance so unique and so special is that it's oriented toward people who come from a wide range of life. Like I told you, I had a college education, but I was in class with people who did not have that, who had, different circumstances in life that made those life skills classes so full and rich because I got to hear about other people's experiences and what drew them to the program as well. And then the second tier of the program, so that's week 8 to 16, it's more, I guess, career development oriented. So you go from the smaller kitchen with Chef Brian and you're working with the actual in-house residents, like who the cooks who work there. And what you're doing is making really large volume food that goes out to the community. So you're either cooking the food, you're working with the volunteers, and you might be organizing them or, packing food with them or doing a wide range of activities. And then later in the day, you're working on your still working toward your ServSafe certification courses, but also you're working a lot more with Chef's Cam and you're doing that career development piece. And then from about week 12 to 14, you actually go out on an internship. And my experience was a little different. When I decided I was kind of interested in cooking, this was before Philabundance, but not too the distance wasn't too short. I started reaching out to chefs on Instagram. I'm just like, "Hey, my name's Alexa, and I'm interested in cooking. Would you mind sitting down with me, like for a cup of coffee, or like hop on the phone and talk to me?" So one of those connections, I would love to shout him out. Hi, Chef Jameer. So Chef Jameer, we sat for coffee, and at the time, he and his cousin, Chef Montana, were opening a restaurant called The Avery in Old City. And I met up with him again. This was probably around like week 10. So this is before the internship actually started, but I started staging at their restaurant and they offered me a job. So that was my very first line cook position, which I feel like most people don't necessarily start their career that way. A lot of people will start maybe in like start with like something like receiving where, when groceries or not groceries, but like ingredients come in, you're responsible for making sure that's stored away properly, especially in a fine dining establishment. So I feel really grateful for my first experience to have been with those two talented chefs and their extremely talented team. So I was able to integrate that into my internship portion. So that's what my kind of last little part of Philabundance looked like, where what my schedule looked like at the time was, school from 8 to 3:30, work from 4:30 to midnight on the weekends. Just if I was not working brunch, 1 to 12, and if I was working brunch, 10 to 12. It was a really tiring time, but despite that, despite putting so much effort into it and, not to lie, like, to be frank, like, feeling somewhat drained or, to be real, really drained, I didn't feel like I was doing the wrong thing. I felt tired, but I felt motivated, if that makes sense. And then the last part of the program at Philabundance was, just taking your ServSafe certification
Can you
and
explain what that is real fast, just so
oh, yeah, absolutely.
listeners who aren't familiar?
So, ServSafe, it's called different things in different states. So in Pennsylvania, pretty sure it's what it's called. I'm not exactly sure what it's called in other states, but more or less, it's basically a food handler certification to make sure that you understand food safety practices. So that relates to like time temperature abuse. Like you can't keep raw chicken out, room temperature for 8 hours. People will get sick. Learning about, just food safety to make sure that when you are in any space, whether that doesn't even necessarily have to be a restaurant, that could be working in a hotel or food stall or whatever, just to make sure that the people whom are you're serving are getting safe food. It's not always necessary for working in a food space. However, it definitely, with the point of the Philabundance program being, employability, it makes you more employable to know that you have that certification. And it also does cost money to take the certification. However, through Philabundance, we were able to take it for free. So that was just like another extra special point of that program.
That's incredible. That's something that when I spoke to the CEO of Philabundance, she said that that's something that the students can walk away with that's really valuable. And she was explaining to me some of the other facets of the program, like you were touching on a little bit too, some of the life skills, some like training with that. But also she was saying, we try to support the students if they need like say like transportation or childcare or some of those things. Like if there's some sort of roadblock to preventing them from completing the program, they try to support them with that as well, which I thought was really cool. At no extra cost, it sounded like.
I'll share a really vulnerable story just so you can kind of get a picture. This is just my experience. So to be eligible for Philabundance, you have to meet SNAP requirements. And I know SNAP requirements have since changed with this recent administration. So we're going to go back to 2024. And For me, I was working in events, which was more of a freelance position, but because of Philabundance's attendance policy, which is you can't have more than like about 5 absences, I was had to decline a lot of work. So honestly, from January to March, when I told you I started working with Chef Jameer and Chef Montana, I was not working. So I was living off of my savings. It was my first winter in Philadelphia. So I was not familiar with how much my utility bills were going to rise. It was honestly a really difficult time for me financially. So through that, Phil Abundance, I was able to, they supported me with meals. They supported me with feminine care products. They supported me by just having someone to, listen. Miss Tiffany, who kind of runs that life skill program, like she has served and continues to serve as a mentor for me. Someone who, if I have a problem and, she's in turn been vulnerable about similar problems that she's had in her life, just having someone where you can feel supported. And I think another component to that, especially in just like the culinary world, is there's not a lot of people who look like me in the long run. I've been into kitchens that have, lots of Black people, but there are kitchens where I've kind of been the only one. And this is I haven't had that long of a career, so I've been to so many kitchens, but it's really nice to be in like a I would say just due to the demographics of North Philadelphia, a primarily Black space where you don't feel othered or you have, issues that may relate to, socioeconomic problems. It's nice to have someone who, can relate to that. Whether they have had, some of the people you're working with are chefs, but some of them aren't. Some of them are administrators or some of them are, other volunteers. And it's not necessarily that you're disclosing those problems to the volunteers, but, conversations just come about naturally. People sometimes are there doing volunteer work to meet requirements for, situations that they're in. And, just learning about other people's lives and just kind of made me feel a little bit more connected and less like alone as I was going through those personal struggles. I would say it's not the type of environment where you just show up and you leave your problems at the door like a regular, like I'm not gonna say regular kitchen, but the kitchens that I'm kind of in right now. But you really can take them in there with you. I remember one day when I was working in tier one with Chef Brian, and he's an amazing he's gonna get into it like, "What?" He's an amazing chef, and I love Chef Brian so much, and I just remember just feeling super overstimulated that day, and I was just crying, and I he didn't even realize that, there was something that he may have done that made me feel that way, but I was coming from, a personal situation that had just had me a little dysregulated. So we sat and we talked, and I shared with him what was going on in my life, and, he told me that, we actually even utilize some of the life skills. One of the lessons that we talked about is perception, which is like the way you perceive things may not be the way other people perceive things. So, being more flexible in those situations. So we were just able to have a really great conversation. And I just left that conversation feeling like, you know what, I can do this. I can do this even when I'm working with a chef who's not Chef Brian, who doesn't care really about my personal problems. Like I know that I can have the just that grounding for myself. So, if your knife skills are perfect, but you're going to explode when someone talks to you a little bit, less than ideally, like this industry isn't for you. So I think in that way, it really develops you wholly. Like, yeah, you're learning this, and that's why that is their model. You're learning knife skills, but you're also learning life skills.
I love that, like, knife skills and life skills. Well, what an incredible opportunity that you can be in an environment and feel like you said, you feel safe to be vulnerable and have those, tough moments and not because I think the perception I don't have any experience working in F&B, but I think there is a perception that the F&B world can be really, really tough, and especially for women. I have some friends who are female chefs, and some of the stories they have told me about working in kitchens is pretty crazy. So, how incredible that you have this space to kind of learn and make mistakes and go through tough things like you were going through and be supported and not, made to be feel like you're not tough enough or something.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it.
Well, tell me a little bit about what you're doing now, where you're working, what your role is, and I'd also love to hear about your hopes for your career in the future.
So right now, I'm a line cook. I work at Fork, which is owned by Ellen Yin. It is a really incredible restaurant. Our primary focus is Italian and New American cuisine, and I work the morning shift. So if you came in for lunch or brunch, that's where you would see me on the line. I right now am feeling so challenged. I just left in October, I left a different kitchen. It was an extremely popular restaurant in Philadelphia where we had a staff of like, I don't know, like 50 people. And that's including our prep cooks and our dishwashers and like just the entire back of house. Now our kitchen's a lot smaller. And at first it was a big adjustment. It's like, oh, I'm not that it's going to be easy, but it's going to be like, I wasn't exactly prepared for what having less people meant in this environment. But Chef Sam is incredible. He's our executive chef, and his goals for Fork, and honestly for everyone in our kitchen, whether you're a sous chef to a line cook to you work in receiving, is excellence. And when that is the expectation, there is a lot of pressure. We recently had kind of like a back of house meeting where we're just sharing what our goals for each other are, like where we can support one another more. And he really just made it clear that, like, I want to push y'all because I know that you guys can achieve these things. So right now, although professionally in that kitchen, I am a line cook. In my own personal pursuits, I call myself a chef because I work by developing menus. A personal project that I kind of learned about is gardening. I'm actually really super interested in food systems just because I think going back to my own personal, background, a lot of Jamaican cuisine is like, what can you get in your backyard and then bring it into your kitchen? So through that, I've actually taken gardening courses that I'm planning for this summer to, start gardening and then, host dinners featuring some of the things that I actually grow myself. So I'm super excited for that. I've been started doing research and development for some of those recipes myself. But what my future holds, I can't entirely say. This is something that I've been talking to some friends about recently about kind of like what it is I want. And I'm not 100% sure. And there's, obviously a lot of uncomfortability and uncertainty. However, I'm allowing myself to understand it's like, remember a year ago when you decided, like, hey, I'm just going to change my entire life? I think you'll be okay. So, allowing myself to lean into that, but not be like lackadaisical about it, just remembering to seize opportunities to continue to work hard. And I think if I continue to work hard, more opportunities will present themselves, even if I'm not exactly sure what it is I want to do. I think my near future, like within the next 5 years, would include going. I went to school in New York, went to school to St. John's University, so I was in Queens and Brooklyn for quite a while. Would be going back, and I always think, ironically, like New York is one of the biggest food, cities in the world, and at the time, you were not even thinking about that. So to kind of go with that renewed purpose would be really amazing, and to connect with some chefs. I know ultimately what I want to cook would be Afro Caribbean cuisine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to learn everything. Like I think the near future, as in like these next few months, would just be staging at different restaurants. And for those who aren't familiar, a stage is basically an unpaid working interview. Well, sometimes it's paid. It depends based off of your, local laws and regulations that pertaining to that city. But just to stage, just to get in kitchens and see what other chefs are doing, other cuisines, other techniques, and then to absorb that. So I would say that's kind of like where I'm at right now.
Wonderful. I mean, I think you you're on a great path just from everything that you're saying because I think back to my 20s and there's so many options, right? And I knew from the start like I want to be a journalist, I want to be a writer, and I was very hell bent on making that happen and I'm glad I did. I stuck to it, but I did like try out all different types of, I worked at magazines, at newspapers, all over the place to kind of get a feel for what makes sense and what I like. And I'm glad I did that because I think you can have an image or an idea of what something will be like in your mind. And then when you actually, the reality can be quite different. So saying open minded and saying yes, like you're saying, I think is so smart because it keeps you open and excited, but you're not necessarily saying, I have to be on this very specific path, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, I wouldn't say success would be memorialized for me. It's like, oh, I'm a chef who has a Michelin star. It's like if I'm a chef who can eventually, I would say like my biggest goal would be to be a teacher. Like Philabundance really gave me so much. Like I would love to be a culinary instructor myself, but I always kind of tell myself like you don't really this is a little self-deprecating, and it's not fully true, but in my head, I'm like, "You don't have anything to give right now." And I know that's not fully true, but in terms of the skill sets that I'm or the skills that I get from my chefs on a daily basis, there are executive sous chef at, Fork, Chef Josh. He kind of personally oversees our morning shift right now. We do have a new morning sous, and if Chef Sophie sees this, congratulations, Chef Sophie. But Chef Josh, he has been in this industry for what feels like, from what I've gathered from our conversation, so like his entire life. So to be able to give like a lifetime's worth of experience to young cooks, that's something that I would really love to do. So I know that would really require a wide range of experiences, because not necessarily every single experience will resonate with every single person. Not everyone in my cohort for Philabundance wanted to go into fine dining. I kind of said that I wanted to do that, kind of similar to you, where it's like, I don't really know what that means fully, but I have a picture of it and this is what I want to do. And I'm grateful for the fact that that picture and the reality, there's like, a lot of similarities between that. But some people wanted to be, entrepreneurs. Some people wanted to work for hotels or in that space. So I want to be able to have a wide range of experiences to give that to people so they can kind of, sift through and find out what resonates for them personally.
I think that's wonderful, and that's why I wanted to highlight this for our audience. So, our audience are people who work in the business events industry, which, yeah, you're familiar with. And, I think, a city's especially a city like Philly that has, they have a Michelin guide now, and, it sounds like I've only been to Philly a couple times, but it sounds like it has such a thriving culinary scene. It's so important to the way a destination sells itself to meeting and event planners. So I wanted to highlight PCK just because I thought, you know, this is so important to the community, but also for, for people like yourself who, really want to get into the industry, but also for the hospitality industry to feed them workers. There's, a lot of cities like my city, Charleston, South Carolina, we really struggle with finding and keeping workers. So I think that, I'm hoping by highlighting programs like this, meeting planners will take notice. According to the CEO of Philabundance, she was saying they have quite a few groups who come to the city and want to spend either their time volunteering or make donations, support them in some way, or just to like note that food banks like Philabundance who have programs like this are important to keep note of and support. So yeah, I'd love to know in your words, like, why do you think, and from your experience now that you've gone through this program, like, why do you think a program like PCK is important to the community and maybe just like the wider hospitality industry since you've worked in it?
I want to start off with a personal anecdote. PCK, every not every cohort gets this experience. However, I was lucky enough to get to participate in their showcase. So me and my partner, shout out Jaden, we created a dish and we pretty much, cooked it or cooked portions of it live for folks who joined us. And one of the people who, we spoke to was Ellen Yin, for whom now I work. And we had an amazing conversation that very day where, we stepped aside and she just asked me what I was doing. And she asked me if I would have any interest working, for her. And at the time I was working at a different restaurant and, I was really passionate about that. But I mean, here I am now working at Fort. And there are days when I still don't feel like I am deserving of the opportunity. Sometimes I don't feel like I've done enough work. I've working alongside people who have, 5, 10, 15 years of experience, and they are so inspiring to me in that way. But it's I would say overall a kitchen culture where teamwork truly is paramount to, what it is we do. So that is all to say through Philabundance specifically, I was able to meet Ellen Yin, and I'm now at Fork working with incredible chefs, incredible cooks, incredible people, both front and back of house, putting out amazing meals for, Restaurant Week. We were so busy and, with good reason. So Restaurant Week, major holidays, graduation season, those are some really, really busy times for the restaurant industry. So I would say through Philabundance, people who work in different parts of the event space, different parts of hospitality, would meet incredible people, even if, again, like me, they're not necessarily interested in going into fine dining. There are people who are, especially for people who have children, who want to have careers that are more work life balance. So, I know someone who, while she was going through the program, she had 4 kids. Again, having to meet those requirements, but making sure that her babies got to school and got picked up, among, other things that are happening in her life, and is now working in a hotel. So I would say you would meet a variety of people who are, if you're in that program, you're there because you want to make your life better. You're there because you love food, and you're there because, you're looking for opportunities. So I would say anyone there would meet individuals who they may not be aligned with their specific industry. Like I said, I was more interested toward fine dining, or that's where my orientation was at the time. But you're going to meet someone who is perfect for whatever it is your specific niche is. I met so many people during my time, and I still kind of think about that. It's like, I really should just like think about that opportunity. Again, it doesn't actually have to be a full-time opportunity, but even just like I would love to stage. I would just love to see what your operation is. And there's so many curious, smart, intelligent, hardworking people who go through that program on, a yearly basis, an annual basis, that at any point in time, if you were to step in the building, you're going to meet students who would add so much value to your whatever it is your organization does.
I mean, I think that's the foot in the door thing when you're young and just starting out is, I mean, that's just so huge. So that the fact that they're able to make those connections and introductions. We wrote the story because they told us that they were partnering with Michelin. So now they're going to be hopefully adding some Michelin restaurants and chefs to the program so that students will actually get to either intern or be mentored by some of these Michelin star chefs, which is incredible. And by the way, don't let the imposter syndrome get you. You deserve to be there.
I really appreciate that. That's something that I, battle with, and
We all do. But
all
you
do.
deserve to be there for sure. Well, that's incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think is really important for our audience to know, or that you just want to say or share about the program or your experience?
I would just finish with the fact that, again, not just life skills, but life skills. I know we spoke a lot about, like, professional goals and career development, but truly that program gave me so much in a time when I was struggling based off of my own life circumstances. So even if someone listening to this has no familiarity or doesn't really resonate with, wanting to be in the culinary space, just know that there are programs like this that exist. I think we're living through, like, really, I wouldn't say unprecedented, but really scary times right now. So to remember that there are still organizations and communities that are still focused on serving and filling gaps, it's so important. So even if you can't necessarily give back, even if you're not in Philadelphia and you're listening to this and you're on the other side of the country and the other side of the world, I think knowing that there is community, I hope that, strengthens people's resolve to keep going during this time. I hope that, anyone listening to this just feels like also it's like, I should come eat at work too.
Definitely support our local restaurants wherever you are. That's something we talk about a lot. So I think that audience will definitely understand that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Alexa. This has been such an incredible podcast. Thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable with us. It's clear you're going to go very far. So hopefully, I'd love to circle back with you in a year and see where you are and see what rest kitchens you're running, because I'm sure you will be.
I hope I'm still at work, honestly. There's so much that I'm learning there. Every day I truly learn something new. So I hope I'm still there.
I'm sure you will be. Or on to bigger and better things, which. For anyone listening, if you want to know a little bit more about Philabundance, we have some links in the show notes, and we also have links to our February 2026 issue, which also has a story about Philabundance. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being here, Alexa.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I really appreciate all of your time.
Remember to subscribe to the Convene podcast on your favorite listening platform to stay updated with our latest episodes. For further industry insights from the Convene team, head over to pcma.org/convene. My name is Maggie. Stay inspired, keep inspiring, and until next time.